There we go, guys. Thank you very much for joining us today in the podcast room for Outdoor Photo. We've got Wim van Heever from Tusk Photo. Wim, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's great to be back.
Yeah, it's you're basically like family in the shop here. Thank you for coming in. I know it's a bit of a runaround, especially with your busy schedule.
Yeah.
Where have you been lately?
Well, the last year's been really busy. We've had a tight schedule. I think post-COVID, travels have taken me all over the globe. Well, let's take May last year. I was off to Norway, Svalbard. From Svalbard, came back, did a bit of a stint in Namibia. From there up to Brazil, did a bunch of tours after that in Botswana, as well as some of the local stuff that we do in the Sabi Sands, and then from there on the Chobe River. And 2 months ago, I was in East Africa again for 2 months, for 1 month. Did Ngorongoro, Ndutu, Serengeti, as well as Amboseli again.
You literally go to the most spectacular spots in the world, and you obviously take people with. I mean, some of the images that I've seen people posting from Amboseli, especially with that huge tusker. What's his name?
Craig. Yeah. So Craig, I mean, he's just such a photogenic animal. I mean, you just need to point a camera in his direction. It's a world-winning picture almost. It's just such an amazing experience. He's. I can almost say it's almost like a soul connection for me to work with that animal as well.
Majestic moment.
He's like really, really big, and he's so gentle, and it's such an amazing experience. He's getting old now, so you have to enjoy every single moment you can with that animal. But really, really spectacular, and I've been, thoroughly enjoying the last 2 years working with that animal. Really spectacular.
Incredible. The images are also absolutely spectacular.
Yeah.
There's a groot tand. Now, looking at the Svalbard trip as well, I mean, you're going from high up in Africa to the worst weather temperatures that I can imagine. What are the conditions there?
Yeah, so Svalbard was quite interesting. It's I've been there before, but it was really special to be back there, and especially as early as that in the season we went. I specifically, opted to go there in May. It was really good. Got to spend some good time there, and it was also my very first experience using the Z9. So that was the first time I actually got my hand on one. As you know, there was a worldwide shortage, and you just couldn't get your hands on any of them. And it was really spectacular to get that camera in hand for the first time. But I must admit, it was a rocky road initially. I was really battling.
Yeah, it is quite a rough changeover from shooting DSLR, and I mean, looking at your history, your photography started with your dad, if I understand correctly.
Yeah.
And that's in the old film days.
Old film days, using SLR, just all manual focus, putting films in, and winding up your films afterwards, and pushing F stops or pushing stops or ASAs or whatever. And those were the good old days. And then from there on to DSLR, and now obviously on to mirrorless after that.
And quite a change of system. I mean, methods and things in using it, the practicality of it.
Yeah, so it's all changed quite dramatically. I would say it would probably be the same as going from SLR to DSLR. The change and the shift from DSLR to mirrorless, it would probably be the same. There are a lot of things that work totally different on the new mirrorless systems. Things that we're not 100% accustomed to and used to while shooting DSLR. I think the most obvious there would just be the live view function,
exposure simulation. Yeah,
correct. Everything's totally different in that perspective. But it's all good. It's a learning process for me. And if you had asked me about a year ago what were my thoughts on mirrorless, I was still very apprehensive and very, very worried about switching over to mirrorless, because I kept on feeling that I was losing a lot of pictures. And in fact, coming back from Svalbard last year, there was one specific period where I actually opted to switch back to DSLR, specifically to photograph puffins flying around, because I felt that the mirrorless system was just keeping me up at that point. And more specifically, the Z9. I was very, very worried about using the Z9 because it kept on jumping onto the background. And it took me a very long time to sort of settle down with the camera system and to move on from there,
Now, obviously, switching to mirrorless, it's got its little tricks that you have to get used to.
Absolutely.
And I think how much of it was just simply getting used to new muscle memory versus the DSLR. I mean, you've been shooting D850s for
a very long time.
Well, which is, in my opinion, the best DSLR that the market's ever seen.
Yes, arguably it was a magnificent camera platform. It did everything that you wanted as a wildlife photographer. Arguably, the only thing that it really lacked was, frame rate and a bit of a buffer or whatever. But other than that, it was such a robust machine. It worked very well. It was very well priced as well. So it meant that you could walk in and with a very marginal barrier to entry, walk away with a fantastic a camera system, and I worked with it for many years, loved it, and I think that was part of the apprehension of moving over to DSLR,
that muscle memory,
mirrorless. I think the saving grace for me was going to Brazil. On the Brazil tour, we have a section where we find ourselves at Barraca dos Araras. It's this big sinkhole out the middle of nowhere, and you have these breeding macaws all along the edge of this sinkhole, and then they come flying around. And I actually forced myself then. I said, okay, right, this is going to be the moment now. I'm going to put down my DSLRs. I'm just going to focus on the mirrorless system. I'm going to fiddle around with every conceivable menu option, delay, lens option, whatever I can find, and then let me see if I can get the system to work. And I think it took me about a week of just sticking through and messing around with it, and then eventually I got that system really dialed in very well, and I haven't looked back ever since. Now I'm looking at that camera and it's just my best friend.
But that is such a key point in working with this kind of gear. You have to get accustomed. I think it was in one of Brendan,
my colleague.
Your colleague, he said in one of his workshops, you have to operate your camera in the dark. And that's part and parcel about that muscle memory, just getting used to the gear.
And it's also knowing what the different focus modes do, what the different modes within the camera do, and how they affect each other. Must I have eye tracking on or off at this point? Simple things like that. Yes, these mirrorless cameras have this amazing function to have animal eye tracking on or human eye tracking on or off or whatever, but you need to know when to use and when not to use it. There are times where it's better to turn that function off, and shoot without it, and the camera actually performs a lot better using or not using animal eye tracking at that point. And it took me a long time to get to the point where it became, like you said, muscle memory, where I knew under these conditions, with this lighting and with this subject, it's better to have either animal eye tracking on or off or not.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with that, with the options that you've got available for you,
Correct.
Whatever you want to do on the camera. But as much as options are great, options can also be a problem.
Correct. It's almost like a Formula One race car, versus just a run-around car that you go to the groceries with, And for normal people, if you had to give them a Formula One or a race car or whatever, it would be a very difficult thing because they're so finicky. They've got, different tires and different compounds and different gearboxes and different engines and whatever. And everything needs to be dialed in, and eventually you can get to a point where you can go really fast. Whereas if you climb into just a normal car, and that was your D850, because it was so forgiving, you could just pick the camera up, put a lens on, and you'd probably be within 80 or 90% of the optimum performance of the camera, and for the most people, that would be fantastic. That was really, really good. Whereas I think with the new mirrorless systems, and it's not just common to Nikon or to Sony or to Canon or whatever, they all have this process that you need to embrace of figuring out how the camera operates and how it suits your shooting mode and your shooting style as well.
I think another key feature, and you just mentioned just slapping a lens on. I know that you've just picked up an absolute golden nugget. Tell us a little bit about what lens you are operating.
Yeah, so it was almost by accident. Beginning of this year, I was desperately trying to get my hands on a 400 2.8. I've been using 400 2.8 for many years, and it's almost my go-to lens, and always has been my go-to lens. Couldn't get one. For the love of money, Nikon does not have a 400 2.8 with a new drop-in converter available for us for the new Z9s, etc. So there was just no option available for me. And you know, I almost felt done in, opting for the 400 4.5, and it's been an absolute revelation. I used it for the first time on the Chobe River, and up to that point, I'd been using a 120-300 2.8, the new Nikon one, and when I put the 400 4.5 on, I was just absolutely blown away. The lens and the camera combination, it's such a sweet spot. The camera holds focus under the most ridiculous, most trying conditions. I'll share with you a bunch of pictures that I've taken on the Chobe River, for instance, with bee eaters coming in to come and bath, taking off, shooting them at 20 frames a second, trying to sift through the 200-300 shots where everything's just perfect. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's just one shot after another after another. Just absolutely mind-blowing. You know, I had things like what do you call these malachite kingfishers? Sorry, how was that? I'm getting old, guys. Remember all this grey hair. All right, so I had malachite kingfishers, and you know they are ridiculously fast, and you know to try and capture those things in flight, it's virtually impossible. But with the 400 4.5 and the Z9 combination, it was just bang on, you know. And I had difficult backgrounds, you know, and yet the camera just picked it up and kept the focus on it. It was such an easy task to do. I had half-collared kingfishers that I was doing the same with. Fish eagles, I mean, it was just ridiculous how easy the fish eagles were. You know. Skimmers, I eventually stopped photographing the skimmers because, you know, I'd just taken several thousand already. You know, how many skimmers do you need? You know, but you know, then eventually I was just, you know, playing around with bee eaters, kingfishers, and things like that, and the camera just blew me away completely. The camera and lens option, sorry.
Yeah, but that's another advantage of that lens. I mean, everything has become so much lighter now. The Z9 is not in that same bracket. That's still quite a brick. It's a solid piece.
Yeah, it's heavy. It definitely is heavy. But you know, marry that with that 400 again, the 400
perfectly balanced.
And it's so light and it's so nimble and so easy to use, and it's just it's a happy marriage. It's one of the most.
It's a great combination.
Yeah, I got back from that trip on the Chobe River, and I phoned a couple of friends and colleagues and people that I work with, etc. I said, listen, guys, we got problems.
One of the other things in that combination, you've been using the Z9 now for a while, and obviously adapters and the old lenses, and it works. But how much of an advantage is it switching to the new Z mounts?
Yeah, I think it's quite huge. It's really, really big. In East Africa, I was happy to use the 800 as well, the new 800 6.3. I mean, it weighs
also light.
Come on, 2.3 kilos. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, where in the world have you ever picked up a long lens that weighs as little as that? You know, magic, absolutely magic. And I was once again blown away. You know, the images are crisp, they're sharp. Married with the Z9, it's just such a happy combination. It just works so well. You know, it's the happiest I've been in my photography my whole life. Let's put it that way. And I'm not just saying that. You know, I'm very, very honest when I say that it is a really good system at this point.
I've got a simple thing that I usually tell people, and comes from a sporting background where equipment isn't the be all and end all of photography or whatever hobby or profession you're doing.
Yeah.
But when your confidence in the kit is up, your results are up as well.
Absolutely. You know, and I think now using the camera and the lens combinations more and more, I sort of understand when it's really going to be optimal and what conditions I should be looking for. I should be looking for a little bit more sun angle or less sun angle or whatever the case may be. And once you sort of understand all that, the cameras just, they just blow you away. It's mind-blowing. It's really, really good.
Now, the megapixels on that as well, a really big problem that people experience or they don't take into consideration is when you've got so many more pixels, your camera is more prone to camera shake. But obviously with IBIS and having the correct settings and everything else, you eventually eliminate that problem as well. And with the low light handling of something like the Z9, pushing the ISO slightly more.
5-stop stabilizers, come on.
And that works in combination with the image stabilizer on the lens.
Exactly. I mean, I was shooting a whole bunch of scenes in East Africa with ridiculously low shutter speeds. You know, I'm talking about 40th, 50th of a second. You know, now provided your subject doesn't move around, you're still pulling those pictures off. You know, and they make like great shots. You know, so yes, again, utilization of the new technology, the new functions available to you, just opens up so many new doors to you. You know. Back in the day, there's no ways you'd get those pictures. There's absolutely no ways.
And it's a simple thing. But in the beginning, when the flip screens started coming out and the tilt screens and whatever, people were like, oh no, that's just another thing that's going to break. It's rubbish or whatever.
Yeah.
How versatile does that make the kit?
Extremely.
I mean, you guys are getting the shots with Craig. I mean, those low angle shots, I'm sure it helps being able to flip something out and just trying a different angle.
Well, you've nailed it right there. You know, so having the ability to flip the screen out and to lower the camera, not having to look through the viewfinder, just makes it so much easier. I mean, it's ridiculously ridiculous how easy that has become now. Using that flip out screen, it is just flipping amazing.
Pun intended.
Exactly.
I'd like to discuss Tusk Photo as well a little bit. A lot of people, when I suggest Tusk Photo for people to go onto safaris and gain more experience, the first feedback, no, I'm not that good yet.
Yeah.
And I think it's a key point that people miss is how much you guys actually assist the people on the safari. I mean, it's a photographic safari.
Exactly. So, you know, I've had people arrive on tour with iPads. I had a lady, what was it, about 3 years ago. It was sort of just on the tail end of lockdown. I think we were the first South Africans to go into Botswana at that point, or whatever. And she arrived with a new iPhone, which was quite interesting. But it worked. We got some pictures. I mean, come on, you know, often, you know, you use your photographic knowledge to position the vehicle optimally. You predict what the animal's going to do, and therefore you can get yourself in a position where you know that, you know, the lion's going to get up now and he's probably going to go and drink water. So you preempt that and you end up, you know, much closer to the water and lining up. And even if you're using a cell phone, you're getting better pictures, you know. So I think that's where we try and add a bit of difference, you know. So if you look at, you know, we've just spoken about Brendan. You know, Brendan's worked in the field for many years. I mean, he was trained as a guide and you know, he was hunting back in the day. He was still, you know, had his hunting boots on in Zimbabwe as a game scout, etc. He did all his training and stuff like that, so he knows animal behavior. You know? So he's worked in the bush industry and he's worked with animals his whole life almost. You know, so same thing with you know, guys like Davy, or, you know, Ben, who's a vet. You know, so these guys know and understand animals. You know, so I think we try and use our knowledge not just with the cameras and with photography, but also the subject matter. And therefore, if people do sign up with us, I hope they seem to see that they do end up with a much better result at the end of the day.
Well, some of the feedback I also got from one client specifically said that he compares it to a single day with you guys out in the bush. Yeah. He compares to 10 days on his own trying to find something.
Well, that's very kind of him, yeah.
So that was a great compliment, and that's why it's easy to recommend you guys.
Yeah.
I mean, we in the shop get a lot of good feedback from the clients going on Tusk Photo safaris.
Yeah, well, that's very kind of you. So obviously we try our best every day, and we give it 110%. You know, we're always out there. We're always trying to push as hard as we possibly can, and we're nice people too.
That helps. Looking at the future, what's the next challenge that's up ahead for you guys?
Oh goodness, so many new things coming up. Right, so we've got pumas coming up quite soon. We'll be going down to Patagonia, walking around in the mountains trying to find some pumas again, and most of it's on foot. Obviously we'll work with those big cats down there. I'm off next week to Rwanda to do our first guerrilla trek. So looking forward to a bunch of new things like that. Then obviously we've got some of our old, let's call it pre-COVID tours. We haven't done them subsequently, but things like Falklands. I'll be going back to Falklands quite soon again. We've got 2 Svalbard tours lined up again, one next year and the one year after. So looking forward to some of those really, really nice tours. I'm still keeping eyes on snow leopards. It's one thing I've always wanted to go back, but it's always difficult because your local authorities in India, they came up with the rule you can't get closer than 400 meters from a snow leopard, a wild snow leopard, and that meant that there were very few places that you could get a really good, decent picture of a snow leopard. I look at all the snow leopard pictures coming out of Himalayas at the moment, and I'll be very honest with you, they're very mediocre. You get these messy environments, very, very stark countryside with a snow leopard in it, and people get carried away with how beautiful the animal is. And yes, it is a very special thing, but the photography isn't great, So I've always been looking to try and replicate what we initially did when we were the first company to go back to almost discovered snow leopards back in the day. We were the first guys out there doing that work. And in those days, we could actually access these animals and get some really decent pictures. But subsequently, with the new rules and regulations, it's made it very difficult to get the shots. And I understand the rules and regulations because everybody and his dog eventually started going there. So, and it became very difficult for those animals. So it was. But I'm keeping my eye on that as well.
Rules and regulations are usually for the people who couldn't use common sense.
Absolutely.
So it's a pity to hear that it's such a challenge, and I can imagine. I mean, those cats don't come out and come and pose for you.
You got to work hard. It's a very hard tour. That I see some of the stuff that's coming out now recently. There's some beautiful lodges now. I mean, you can get yourself into a really comfortable room. When we initially went, for 2 weeks you'd be sleeping almost on the ground in a very small pup tent with very, very, very limited facilities. Your toilet was a hole in the ground, my friend. Off you go. Have fun.
There's
out
a
in the
bucket of
open.
water. Good luck. Looking at Svalbard as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the preparation going to those conditions. What's your main recommendations? I mean, you guys walk through all your guests and obviously the preparations and what they need to do and prep for.
Yeah, so it's actually quite an easy tour, Svalbard. It's not that crazy. Even though we went early in the season, and generally speaking, you can pick up a couple of cold days then. I think the biggest problem would rather be wind. That's about your biggest problem that you have. Conditions are minus 10, minus 15 or whatever, but the wind's a big one. No, well, like this, the Norwegians say there's no such thing as cold, there's just bad clothing, so you must make sure that you wear the right clothing, and that's where Craghoppers has been very good to me. They've always taken care of my clothing needs, and it's really good.
Good quality clothing,
good quality clothing, and it's not big and heavy and cumbersome, etc. You can, end up with a really nice outfit. Is that the right word? Outfit. I could clothe myself in a manner that still gives me enough maneuverability. I can walk around. I can still photograph. I can still do whatever I need to do, and that's been really, really good in that sense. So, in terms of preparation, not too much. Funny enough, cameras. These days, your cameras work at minus 50. They're quite happy. Cell phones don't work that well, but the cameras are pretty happy.
The key is just trying to keep the batteries warm.
No, batteries are happy. I think the biggest problem would rather be trying to keep your cameras from fogging up. That would be a bigger problem. So when you go from a cold environment to a warmer environment, your cameras tend to fog up. So when you're outside in the cold and you go back into the ship, you can have a problem at that point. But that's easy to overcome. You leave your cameras out in an area where they don't come completely back in.
Basically.
Yeah, so they're acclimatized. You leave them in the camera bags, and you only bring them in very, very slowly, or you leave them in camera bags and make sure that you don't open the camera bags in after that. But apart from that, it's quite an easy tour actually. It's very, very beautiful, and it's an absolute privilege to be there. Last year I cried on 3 occasions, and one of them was when I was up in Svalbard looking at that magnificent vistas around me. I'll share some videos with you, and you can understand, just the magnificence of the scene. You just stand there and you look at it, and you can't
describe it.
You can't. It's just the most magnificent scene area around you. The seas are completely perfectly flat with this magnificent reflection everywhere you look. It's really quite special. It's quite something.
Any personal bucket shot lists?
From those trips?
No. Now, what you're hunting for this year?
I still have in the back of my mind to go and photograph clouded leopard. I'd love to go and find those cats still. It's one of those bugbears, if you want to call it. I still like to try and get them. Very, very difficult. You need to put a lot of time and a lot of effort, and you need to be extremely lucky to really get them. I know of a lot of people that have gone there and then just by hook or crook, and then they end up with pictures of them. But in general, you need to spend almost a month there before you can sort of walk away with anything sort of decent. I'm talking about handheld shots, not camera trap shots at this point. So those are very, very difficult shots, and I'd still like to at some point invest the time to actually get in a place where I can photograph them decently.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Vimo, I want to thank you so much for coming out today and coming and having a chat with us.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Where can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so basically follow us on tuskphoto.com, as well as on my personal website, wimvandeneerfer.com as well. And then Facebook, Instagram, Wim van Eefer Wildlife Photographer, and on Instagram, Wim_fun_den_Eefer. All the underscores.
All of them.
Exactly.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming out
so
and
much,
having a chat with us.
Yeah, it's
Look
been
forward
wonderful.
to seeing more of your work. Right, guys, thank you very much for joining us for another podcast. We'll look forward to bringing you some more content. Cheers.
Excellent.